Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we are going to take a look at all of the major astrological transits for the month of June. It was a really busy month of May. There were a lot of major transits. We had Mars and Jupiter conjoining over the weekend in the sign of Aries, new moon to start the week in Gemini. But we are going to look forward now to the month of June and take a look at all of the big transits. So just so that you guys know, if you're newer to my channel, I do a separate video on your horoscopes for the month. So today we're just starting with some coverage of all of the major transits of the month, so you get a sense of which particular astrological aspects we're going to be looking at throughout the month one by one. It's kind of like your sneak preview of everything we're going to be breaking down week by week as the month of June unfolds. I don't pick every single transit. I pick those that I think are the most important, so I call them the major transits of the month. And then I will have several of those transits that I think are the most important for all 12 signs. We'll be going through those this week as well. So that is what our agenda looks like for today. As you guys are already aware of, please like and subscribe. Share your comments in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, all of that helps the channel to grow. If you're already subscribed to the channel, make sure you click the notification bell for updates. Leave your comments too. That always helps as well. Transcripts of my daily talks can be found on my website, nightlightastrology.com, where you can also learn more about my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, which starts very soon now. We are just we're about a little less, I guess, than 2 weeks out, about 2 weeks. And you can check it out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses page, go to the first year course. You can scroll down to learn more about it. There is a video from a couple of weeks ago with a number of alumni from my program who joined me to talk about their experience in the program and studying in the program, what they've gotten out of it. So be sure to check that out if you want some testimonial. The class includes 30 online webinars. They happen on Sundays from about noon to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. They are led by me. But if you can't make the webinars live, you can always catch up with the recordings, which we post on the class website. You can download and keep everything in the course, and you have perpetual access to the course website as well. Outside of those 30 lectures, we also have breakout study sessions led by a tutoring staff that is manning the discussion forum for the year. And I'm there helping out as well. If you have questions for me, you can email anytime. And we also have 12 guest lectures that come, lots of bonus material, quizzes, all sorts of things that you can do to take your education as far as you want to. It's really a course that's made for people who want to go really deeply into the program, or who might want to go, more lightly into the course material, just kind of depending on what your intention is. Some people are going to come out of this program with a professional practice ready to go. Some people are going to be taking this class just for the sake of personal growth and spiritual growth. So it's really built for people that are coming for different reasons. If you have any questions about the course at all, feel free to email info@nightlightastrology.com. Or don't forget that the year 2 and horary classes start June 11th and 12th. If you are interested in horary in particular, you just have to, you need a background in traditional astrology to join, but feel free to ask us about that if you have any questions. Those start on June 11th and 12th as well. And don't forget, at the bottom of the course, you can check out the different payment options. There's an early bird payment that is only available until next week, so be sure to take advantage of that. You save $500 off when you pay in full. We also have a 12-month payment plan if you want to stretch it out over the course of a year. Sometimes that makes it a little bit easier as well. And then don't forget the need-based tuition. If you need assistance to make the program possible, we are glad to help people out in the hopes that the astrology course is always available for people, especially when your intention is to learn and grow spiritually. We feel like astrology should be accessible for everybody. So yeah, on that note, hope to see some of you in class soon. We're starting really quickly now. Orientation went out. People are already getting oriented in the group forum. If you've registered but haven't heard from us, we've already sent everything out. So check your spam folder, check promotions folder, or email us again, info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, well, today we're going to look at the major transits of June 2022. So with that, I am going to put the real-time clock up on the screen, and we are going to start breaking down the transits one by one. Now, for this, like I said, I'm picking the major transits of the month, and I am looking at them with an eye for what are the things that everyone is most likely to notice this month. And it starts on June 3rd when Mercury turns direct. This is a major moment for the planet Mercury, who's been retrograde for a while now. So one of the things that's really interesting about this retrograde is that this retrograde happens, and then the very next day, on June, so you see it stationing on June 2nd, June 3rd, turns direct, and then June 4th, Saturn turns retrograde. The reason that that is so interesting in this case is because the two are in an almost perfect square to one another as they are both meeting, stopping, and turning the opposite way. In horary astrology, this is called a rephrenation, and it means that two planets are about to get together, but then they stop, and one of them turns the other direction before the two can meet. In this case, they both turn away from one another. Thinking about this symbolically, I wonder about Mercury meeting Saturn, coming close to doing something that looks like a Mercury-Saturn square, or coming up against some kind of block or limitation, only to turn that around and somehow start moving forward, start moving beyond whatever that square might represent. So let's say, for example, that you're thinking about doing something that's a little strict or stern or severe, or you're coming up with an idea or a plan that's a little too rigid or something like that, or you're thinking of doing something very definitive, right? Mercury, Saturn, but then Mercury stops, turns direct, and before the two can meet, Saturn's also turning retrograde. So it's like, nope, something that could happen may suddenly turn in the opposite direction and not end up happening. So I think that's a really fascinating piece of symbolism to look at in the early part of the month. And that's certainly what we'll be looking at this week, because that's one of the big transits of the week. I mean, we're looking at horoscopes early on this week, but I think by later in the week, we're going to be close to the end of the week. We're really going to be looking at this sequence and going, what could that mean? So this is one of the things that you'll see me breaking down later this very week. Interesting combination. Mercury turning direct on June 3rd, Saturn turning retrograde on June 4th, as the two almost square but refrain from squaring. It's a special consideration called the rephrenation. So June 10th, a little bit further down the line. Let's move forward here to the 10th. On June 10th, you're going to see an interesting aspect between Mercury in Taurus and Pluto in Capricorn. Now, Mercury in, you know what? I realize, because I work as a Hellenistic astrologer, I work with the traditional 7 planets, and will often take out the outers and then plug them back in depending on what I'm doing. So I guess I've forgotten to plug them back in. So here is Mercury in the trine with Pluto again. Now, what's interesting about this is Mercury's trine with Pluto has already happened. We got that last week as Mercury was backing through Taurus towards its station point. Now it's moving direct again. So the idea of unearthing something or getting beneath something, coming to understand things that exist below the surface. I gave you guys the example of, in the Grabbed episode from last week, of someone who found a hidden irrigation system control box buried under the earth in their yard. And it was part of the problem part of the reason they were having problems with their irrigation system. So they unearthed this control box, very Mercury, Pluto. Mercury, Pluto, unearthing things, probably coming to understand something in a harmonious manner too. This is a transit that speaks to things coming up that are probably beneficial for us to understand. So that transit happens on June 10th. And really, between now and the 10th, Mercury is only 2 degrees off from that trine. So it's within the engagement range, and you could be feeling the helpful, harmonious quality between Mercury and Pluto for the rest of, the first 10 days plus, and probably the first 15 days of June, just because of the proximity of that separation. Actually, probably a little bit less than that, since it's at the end of the sign. I guess I would say probably the 13th or something like that. Anyway, it gets more interesting because, and we'll be looking at that one in depth as well. Almost all of these we will probably be looking at in individual videos, if not several videos for a couple of them. The next one to me that's really interesting is if we look forward to June 10th, June 10th, what is it? June 11th. Let's go forward one more day. Then you're going to see Venus and Uranus conjoining in Taurus. Now, Venus-Uranus conjunctions are seeding points for a greater cycle, but they involve changes around Venusian things. So let's say that could be your aesthetic, relationships, love, sexuality, beauty, things that are about what you inherently value or find attractive or worthy or enjoyable. And so it's like a style change, a wardrobe change, the sense of there being breakthroughs or rebelliousness or innovation or eccentric, unexpected shifts around anything Venusian. Sisters, women, friends, love, sex, wardrobe, style, art. So that's a very interesting transit. Venus is very well dignified now in her own sign, and so I think this will be probably a more positive Venus-Uranus conjunction, generally speaking. But it is interesting that at the time that conjunction is coming through, we are seeing the moon passing through the eclipse range from the Scorpio eclipse in the month of May. And so there is a fallen moon opposing that Venus-Uranus dynamic. That might be a little bit interesting, but that's not until about June 11th. And again, mostly I think that one's positive, but we will be having to look at that in light of that moon in Scorpio, almost, kind of like a waxing gibbous, almost full moon in Scorpio that's kind of going back over the eclipse point from middle of May. Around June 13th, Mercury will enter Gemini. So we go forward just a little bit more. One of the nice things about having Mercury in Gemini is now it's co-present with the sun as a morning star in its own sign. This is a very a Mercury that's able to get things done, that has the power to think or reason or plan or execute, use or multiple skills, adapt, create a kind of fluidity on the fly that's able to help the sun realize its goals, wherever those may land in your birth chart, for example, looking at the whole sign house of Gemini. So this Mercury becomes pretty empowered and is going back over also the retrograde points from the early part of the cycle, where I think it was about 4 degrees of Gemini that Mercury originally turned retrograde, or maybe it was a little bit more than that, but it was right around the early part of Gemini. And Mercury is now going back over those degrees, back in power as the morning star. Very assertive Mercury, working in cahoots with the sun. So I really like that transit this month too. It's, honestly, the energy this month is so much calmer, as far as I can tell, than last month. Last month was eclipse season. Jupiter entered Aries, the Mars-Jupiter conjunction. To me, it was a very powerful and very overwhelming month in a lot of ways. So if we go forward onto June 14th, then we're going to see the, let's get it back here. Let's go to, here's the full moon. This is the full moon in Sagittarius. So that full moon in Sagittarius comes through on the 14th. The interesting thing is that the full moon is in a square pretty tightly with Neptune. So it's a very interesting kind of dreamy, imaginative, otherworldly full moon in the month of June, in the middle of June, maybe with some sense, something transcendent, imaginative, romantic about the full moon. Also, possibly testing us, what's real, what can be trusted and what can't. What's just a figment of your imagination? Are you staying grounded? Some of the questions that Neptune can bring up. There's a lot of double-bodied energy in the air. So there's a real sort of transitional state that we're moving through energetically in this month, especially around the new and full moons this week. New moon, about the middle of June, we have the full moon coming through. Go forward to June 18th, and we see Venus in Taurus now squaring Saturn in Aquarius. Now, this is a harder moment for Venus this month. With the Uranian transit is, it can be flashy and fun. To me, when Venus gets into a square with Saturn, now we're talking about, the shadows of love, the shadows of Venus, the false images that Venus can present, the hard lessons that Venus has to learn, the maturing and, deepening of integrity, discipline, the school of hard knocks, Venus going to the school of hard knocks. Get that feeling from Venus square Saturn around the 18th of the month. We'll be looking at that one quite a bit because that's that and the Venus-Uranus conjunction, those two together from the 11th to the 18th, about a week apart, are bringing Venus through two very different kinds of energy, archetypal energy fields. You know, Uranus and Saturn are, of course, going to meet very close to a perfect square again in the fall. So it's also, Venus is sort of foreshadowing the two of those planets kind of having to get back together and work things out by the autumn months of this year. Oh, I guess it would be by the spring if you're in the southern hemisphere. June 19th, Venus and Taurus will then sextile Neptune and Pisces. I like that a lot in terms of kind of like a moment of turnaround. Venus goes right from the square to Saturn and Aquarius, right into a sextile with Neptune and Pisces, sort of back to back, really close together on the 18th and 19th. We'll just call it together. I like that because Venus might be hitting a bit of a brick wall with Saturn. Venus could be getting a gut check of some kind with Saturn. It's a little heavier. Neptune is light. You know, Neptune has that feeling of upliftment, and Venus Neptune they get along pretty well in terms of the romantic qualities, especially. On June 20th, Mercury in Gemini will sextile Jupiter in Aries, as it also did when it was retrograde. So this is another moment where Mercury and Jupiter are getting together, and that's on the 20th. So let's, I'll just advance this by one day. And so the Mercury-Jupiter dynamic was happening as Mercury was retrograde and moving backward through Gemini, just as Jupiter had entered Aries earlier in the month of May. Now that's coming back. It's a similar kind of energy in terms of, you know, when I think of Mercury Jupiter coming together, I think of the acquisition or development of new skills, ideas, resources, breakthroughs in understanding, new teachers, or the development of new ideas, developing your voice, speaking out on something that's important to you. Also, like when the mind is on fire, when it's the passionate mind, something like that. Well, we'll be looking at that one a lot because it's coming back again. So it should definitely be something that we dive back into, and even kind of asking ourselves, where have we been since the month of May with some of those topics. We'll probably look at that in horoscopes at some point during the month. On June 21st, if we take it forward one more day, then we're looking at Venus and Taurus trining Pluto and Capricorn. This is, of course, happening as Venus is in the very late anaretic degrees of Taurus. This could be I see this as a positive, but potentially more dramatic or edgy transit for Venus this month, similar to the square to Saturn, which Venus is just passing out of. Picking up a trine to Pluto, it's an empowering place, a regenerating place, a restorative place, but you can definitely rake the muck out a little bit with this Venus-Pluto contact, as Venus is culminating in the classically difficult late degrees of signs of a sign. I think it's its own sign, which is good, but I'd still look at this and go, okay, remember, this is a morning star Venus. It's a very potent Venus in its own sign. It's just gone through a lot this month with Uranus, with Saturn. Now it's hitting a trine to Pluto as it's culminating and about to change signs into Gemini, which, by the way, it will do on June 22nd. So on June 22nd, you can see, if I move this forward just a day and some hours, you're going to see Venus entering in the evening on the 22nd, shifting into Gemini. The nice thing about it being in Gemini, it does lose dignity. It's no longer in its own sign, but it is co-present with its own host, Mercury. So now you've got this real interesting Venus-Mercury dynamic, which to me is very flirtatious, playful, creative. It's sort of like, this transit can be like a little cocksure and flirty and charming to its own detriment. But I really like this in terms of like, look, there's still nice aspectual connections through whole sign sextile to Jupiter and Saturn. You've got nice relationship with to Jupiter and Mars, I should say, nice sextile relationship with Saturn by whole sign. So configured pretty nicely to everything in Gemini. I have a feeling that all of the classic, Venus Mercury, for example, is the beauty of a well-written song, or the ability to have a skill and translate it into, use what am I saying? Interesting mediums through which to communicate beautiful things. Mercury, Venus is a nice combination, especially when Mercury is well dignified and Venus is a house guest and Mercury's sign there. Both also as morning stars. So they're quite assertive in what they're doing or saying. It's a very centrifugal force flowing outward from the center. Going forward a little bit closer to the end of the month, Mars in Aries will sextile Saturn in Aquarius. Let me just show you this. So this is going to be on the 27th. Now, this sextile to me, Mars, Saturn, when they get together, look at the huge arrow came out again. Sometimes it happens. All right, here it is. So, when Mars and Saturn get together, I think often of, get shit done quality, to a quality of productivity, hard work, discipline, rigor. But it also is like you can grind your gears with this one. They're favorably configured through a sextile relationship of the nature of Venus. So you've got the will and the discipline sort of harmonizing, but those two energies configured nicely together can still bulldoze and be quite domineering and overwhelming. So we'll be looking at that at the end of the month too. June 28th, one of the more interesting transits of the month is going to be, switch this forward a day so you can actually see it. Here we go. The 28th, we've got the sun in Cancer at the time of a new moon in Cancer. So this is effectively a new moon in Cancer with the sun and moon square to Jupiter. That's a heck of a signature for a new moon. You've got the Cancerian new moon of late June is like, wow, that's powerful. New moon square Jupiter. You get the feeling of a pretty like things are happening. They're very emotionally driven in that late June moon cycle that gets started there. They're also being fueled by this Aryan, this Jupiter in Aries that's so forceful, loves to start things, is generally inceptional, and there's a lot of gas getting poured on a fire that's now but it's Cancerian. So it's like, okay, you still have Mars and Jupiter in the same sign, so they're very strong. Now configured to a new moon in Cancer, where things tend to be a little bit more romantic, nostalgic, caring, nurturing, sweet, tender, vulnerable, emotional, needy. That's just a super interesting combination to have so tightly configured at the outset of a new moon. So we'll be looking at that new moon in depth late June. The last thing that happens on June 28th is at the exact same time that the new moon is happening in a configuration aspectual square with Jupiter. Venus in Gemini is also making a sextile with Jupiter in Aries. So, to me, that's the benefics very favorably configured to one another. Also, at the time of that new moon, we'll be taking a look at that at the end of the month and trying to get a sense of what Venus in Gemini and Jupiter in Aries playing nicely together might look like. The thing that comes to my mind right away, let me just take this down now. The thing that comes to my mind right away is that you have, again, a very playful, clever, attractive, and intelligent energy in Venus and Gemini, configured with a very action-oriented Jupiter in Aries, being which is both a part of the seeding of the Cancerian concern. Well, that's a good way of defining it. Cancerian concern or worry or need or emotional investment of some kind that's strongly asserting itself at the end of June. So to me, that's probably that configuration at the very end of the month, even though it's a little bit more, taking us a little bit more into the month of July. That one to me is maybe the most interesting transit of the month, aside from all of the big Venus transits throughout the month of June. But, a lot of the time it's funny how like I know astrology, very well, but at the same time, rarely do I sit back and go like, oh yeah, this transit will probably be the biggest one of the month. And then it's often the case that there's something else that I have listed, but it's not necessarily the one that I thought might pop the most. And it ends up, that ends up being the one. So, I knew, for example, that in the month of May, like for example, I had the ingress of Jupiter into Aries and Mars into Aries circled as a pretty big deal along with the eclipses. It's harder to miss on those. You know what I mean? But when it's a month where it's like, okay, there aren't major astrological events like those, it's a little bit more of a crapshoot trying to figure out which transits may really be the loudest. So it'll be interesting to watch along with all of you this month. I'm looking forward to it. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe and share your comments in the comments section of this video. Click the notification bell for updates. Find transcripts of my daily talks on my website, where you can also learn more about the upcoming class. The one-year program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts on June 12th, along with year 2 and horary classes starting June 11th and 12th. Learn more about all of it on the website. Make sure you check out the need-based tuition option if that helps you at all. Email me for any questions, info@nightlightastrology.com. That is what I've got for today. I'm really looking forward to a new month of astrology ahead, and we'll be doing some horoscopes this week as well. So that's it for now. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.